Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NUITEQ Snowflake series of webinars. Tonight we will be talking about incorporating UDL concepts into lesson activities. UDL is an acronym that stands for Universal Design for Learning. Danielle Macklin will be leading this evening's discussion as always. So I would like to welcome Danielle to the stage. There she is, coming on.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Hi Jack.
Hi Danielle.
As Jack was saying, we are going to be spending time today talking about the Universal Design for Learning. And I thought it would be a really good way to incorporate using a Snowflake activity to actually explain how UDL works and some of the guidelines of UDL. So I'm going to open that up for us. So when we talk about Universal Design for Learning, it's a method of thinking about how you are preparing your lesson, both in the content that you're delivering to students, as well as the actual delivery of that material, and then the assessment of that. And as we do that planning using UDL, we're trying to provide students with equal opportunities to learning by removing any barriers to success. So think of it similar to when you create materials with consideration of a student's maybe IEP or their 504 plan, and you construct certain scaffolds or supports that help that student achieve success. This is similar to that, except the focus is more on removing anything that could possibly interfere with a student's ability to learn. So everything from the visuals to audio to any outside stimuli, and then just really thinking about how students are going to process information. So when we look at UDL, we look at it from a very flexible point and understanding that it's not a very rigid structure of how information can be presented. And it considers the why, the what, and the how of learning. So a lot of UDL is based off of neuroscience, of studies of how the brain learns and how people retain information and then how they can express that information. So we're going to look today at the why, the what, and the how of learning. So when we talk about the why, we're talking about what attracts students' attention and engages their interest in learning. So this has to be thought of before you even begin creating a lesson activity. So you know all of your kids, you know their interests, you know the things they like, you know what they don't like. I taught middle schoolers. My middle schoolers were very vocal about what they didn't like. So those were always things that I considered when I was building any lesson in my classroom. So what can I do that's going to draw them into the learning? What's going to hook them in? My middle schoolers love to ask with social studies, why do we need to learn about this? Why is this important? And trying to find ways to engage their interest in learning was a big focus when I was creating my lessons. And some of the ways to do that with UDL is by providing choice. Not so much choice in what they get to learn, but choice in the means of reaching that learning objective. So if my students had to learn about, in 6th grade, they studied ancient civilizations. So we studied ancient India. So they all had to study the same information, but I would be able to provide them choice in how they could get there. And I did that often with our Snowflake activities. One of the features that we have with many of these activities is the ability to have the activities correspond. So if I put in a vocabulary exercise using the guest lesson activity template, I can take that same data and without having to really change anything, I can change the template design and have essentially an entirely new lesson. It's the same information, my students would still be getting it, but now they'd have a choice between which style of learning do they want to do. So they'll still get the content, but they're going to have a little bit more flexibility. It's kind of like telling them, well, you can do, if you can have for dinner tonight, you can have carrots or you can have peas. You're still getting your vegetable, but which one do you want? It's the same idea. We also make sure that when we create our activities using UDL, that we pay attention to activities that allow for active participation. We don't want our students to just passively absorb the information. We want them to be part of that active learning process. We also want to make sure that our lessons are designed to be relevant and appropriate. So appropriate to the age level, to the demographic of the students, to their ability. So just knowing those groups of students and creating content that meets those needs. And we also want to minimize any distractions and risks. One of the things that we focus on when we're designing our lessons with the content team is we want to make sure that it is something that is not just visually appealing, but is going to be visually appealing to a lot of learners. So we don't want to have too much busy stuff happening on the page. So you can see with this particular one, having the ability to create my own customized background. I just did this in a Google Draw. I think it took me all of 90 seconds maybe to do a background that was still really simple, but it was engaging as well. So it's considering those sort of things, considering the visuals, considering the ability to change the size of the text. So right now I have all of my text as small, being on just my MacBook, and since we're just viewing it all together, I didn't need to worry about my text being too big, since there wouldn't be anyone super far away. But being able to change text would be one feature that you can use to help with those sensory issues. Same with the contrast. I have my text darker than the background so that it's able to be seen. These are all features that we have in Snowflake and Snow.live. So as you're creating your lesson, you can take into consideration how to make those visuals appropriate for your students. We also talk with UDL about the what of learning. What is not necessarily the content itself, but it's how can information be presented in ways to reach all of those learners. So again, this is that perception. So similar to what I just said, having a variety of media. So visual, auditory, tactile with customized displays. So we have that ability to change all of those different features in designing our lesson. So with this particular lesson type, this is a cards lesson activity. And as I was creating it, I added my own backgrounds, so my own pictures on the cards. I played with the text a little bit to make sure that it was able to be seen by everyone. Having the colors that aren't too overstimulating so that they're still kind of muted down. Those are all features that we can address and change. We also have to consider language and symbols. So this would be making sure that students understand the vocabulary that you're using. Might mean having to pre-teach some of that vocabulary or help with some of the decoding skills. Also making sure that it's being understood across languages. So you have students who might have processing issues or students who are ELL or ESL learners. Having the ability to add things like additional graphics, combining the text with pictures, as well as being able to record audio, makes that very helpful for all students. So not just students who have those needs, but it would benefit all students as they're using it. So for example, going back to my own experience with social studies, if I were doing a lesson activity to teach vocabulary and I wanted to teach the definition of monarchy, I could have the word monarchy on one of my cards, and then I could also have a picture that would relate to it. So maybe a picture of a crown or a picture of the Queen of England, something that makes the students build that connection between the word and what the word would look like. And then I could also record audio of that word being read as well as the definition. And then the last part of the what of learning is providing ability for comprehension. So this would be your additional scaffolds to help support students as they're engaging with the lesson activity. So one example of that would be this little I button here. So a lot of these lesson activities that you design, you can push those to your students and you can provide information about that as well as those scaffolds of support in this little I part. And I'll show where that is as you're creating a lesson. So with this, I can include a video. So I have a little video clip my students could reference that was maybe perhaps teaching them the content. I can have the description that explains what I want them to do, what the objective and the goal is for the lesson itself, and then links to any external websites or external documents or any hyperlink that would benefit my students. I can include all of that in one place. So all of the information my student would need would be really in just one lesson template design. And the last part is the how of learning. So how do we provide options for students to show what they know? So it's important to assess students in their understanding through those formative assessments. And with our Snowflake software, we do have 8 of the 16 lesson templates can be assigned to students as a gradable assessment. So then you would get that data information back. You would see correct answers, incorrect answers, and then could provide feedback. But we also have the ability for students to create their own lesson activities. So in addition to having a variety of ways to access that information, to get those responses from your kiddos, they can go forward and even create their own activities. And this is really helpful with the idea of expression and communication. So with this, you could create supported levels of lesson activities using templates, where you would say to the student, okay, in this piece of the lesson activity, I want you to find information on X, Y, and Z, or whatever kind of research component you wanted. And then they could use the lesson activity to deliver that research as a way to demonstrate what they've gained and what they understand. And the last piece of the how has to do with executive functions. So executive functions refers a lot to your working memory. And anytime there's a challenge with working memory, it makes learning new information very difficult, not just to retain, but to then have to go back and re-explain or express kind of what it is that what a student has learned. And that could be a major challenge, and it could be definitely a challenge for all students. So with that in consideration, we want to build lesson activities that help scaffold some of those skills, that provide for goal setting, that provide an opportunity to what we call, stop and think, or if you're doing this in a classroom setting, maybe even utilizing think, pair, share. One of the features that we have with that, so when we do the stop and think, I like to think of this as your wait time. So giving students an opportunity to kind of go back into their brains and pull forward that information that you've taught or build those connections. So being able to add timers to our lesson activities is one way that this can be done. Another way is by the poll feature. So if you really wanted to have that real-time checking for understanding with your students, using polls would be a great way to do that, because with polls, it's not going to actually begin until you click the button that says begin, and then you can determine additional time after that for student response. So you can build in that, knowing your students, how much time will they need to process this information. Also with this is the ability to monitor progress and feedback. So I had mentioned about being able to send the lesson activities to students to complete on their own device. And with that, you can send those formative assessments. So you'd have your gradable scores with those. And when a student completed that assessment, they would then have immediate results of what the answers were. So they would see what their response was, what the correct answer should have been, should they answered it incorrectly, their percentage score and total number out of however many were part of that. And then as a teacher, you also have access to that data, so you can then look at areas your students may have struggled in. You can download that information onto a CSV file, so then you can see kind of details of, well, everyone's missing one particular question. Maybe I need to go back and reteach that concept again. And then you can also provide customized individual feedback for each student as well. So in addition to the student getting just that numerical data after they complete the lesson activity, you can send a student a message that's unique to the activity, that's unique to the student, maybe praising the parts that they were successful on or offering tips on how to improve in the future. So that's the how part of the learning. So I know UDL has a lot. There's a lot of information to gain from it. But the big three kind of guiding parts of UDL are thinking of how will your students engage, or how will you engage your students? So what are you going to do to help draw them in to the lesson activity? A lot of this can be done with many of the visuals. So the graphics, the designs, making it relevant to your kiddos. So when I taught social studies, so whenever I was teaching a new region, like if we were learning about ancient Greece, I would have a picture of the Parthenon. If we were talking about ancient Egypt, it would be pictures of pyramids. It would be things that were relevant. So then my students had that visual connection to it, and they would be a little bit more interested in what we were learning about. Second part is how are you going to present the information? So taking into consideration things like the size of the font, the colorings, making sure that there's contrast between the graphics and the text, providing those auditory supports with recorded audio or MP4 files. You could actually even add a little video The cards activity would be a great model for that. So how are you going to deliver that information? And then lastly, how will students show what they know? So how are they going to demonstrate that they understood the content and that they are gaining the skills from the lesson that you've delivered? So that's a lot for UDL. So I'd like to take some time. I can show you more details about the actual lesson templates and where these features all are located that would help with UDL, but I also want to open up for any questions that you might have about this at this time.
So I'm just put out a couple of polls just so that people can look to see that I did put out a couple of polls, and I would ask that people answer them. Is it okay, Danielle, if I take a moment to kind of explain the way that I see it as I did earlier? So
Please.
For Universal Design for Learning, when I'm looking at Universal Design for Learning, I compare it to designing architecture. And so when we look at the way that we design buildings, we design them so that they're accessible to all people. So we build a ramp, and the primary purpose of building the ramp is to help somebody with a wheelchair be able to enter a building without stairs. But there are secondary benefits of those ramps, or third benefits, or whatever. But the ramp also would provide somebody with a stroller ability to walk in with a stroller without needing to use stairs, or maybe someone that just had knee surgery, or someone that's on crutches, or maybe just someone that's old like me that might want to go up the ramp instead of their knees hurting as they go up the stairs. But the ramp is provided primarily for the wheelchair, but that same helping device is helping other people. So it makes the building even more accessible to everyone. So Universal Design for Learning is the architecture of education. It is building content that is accessible to everyone. And it's thinking about, as we build our content, as we design our curriculum, what can we do that would help a student with a specific learning disability, an auditory processing difficulty, a visual impairment, ADD, or maybe even an English language learner. Because if we are able to provide picture representations of words, that might help someone with a reading disability the same as it would help an English language learner. So when we go through an IEP or a 504 and we're looking at accommodations, an accommodation that would help someone with a specific disability may also help your general population, just with somebody that's struggling but doesn't have an actual disability. They're just struggling in one area. So as we're building, we want to look at those things and the way that we can build curriculum and content that makes learning accessible to every student in the classroom, and realizing that any type of accommodation that we give, although it may be specifically designed for one or two students, can probably be helpful to all students. So that's kind of an overview of UDL, and the whole multiple means of representation and multiple means of engagement are that you can use different ways for students to do things, and students can also respond in different ways. So when I make an assignment, and that assignment is an essay, is that really the most appropriate way for every student in my class to show mastery of content? Or would it be that Danielle's great at writing an essay and I might be good at making a video or developing a rap song, and allowing my writing skills to be expressed through rap and show mastery of a science concept or a math concept using rap, while Danielle may do a play or write a story or do an essay? So there are just different ways that everyone can respond. So go ahead, Danielle. Sorry for letting me interrupt. Actually, there is a question. So
Okay.
Oh, nope, everything's good.
Well, I appreciate how you explain that, Jack, with comparing UDL to the idea of just architecture and building, and yes, all of the supports that we're creating, they might help a particular group of students more, but they're going to be beneficial to all of the students. So that's what we try to consider when we are building our lessons. So I mentioned a little bit some of the features that we have that allow you to add those customizations and add those additional scaffolds of support for your kiddos. So I'm just going to quickly demonstrate using just this lesson template itself. So this is the cards template. This is not one of the gradable assessments, but this is really good for providing information, for engaging students in discussion, really prompting those kind of critical thinking skills, so that they can kind of have a little bit more open-ended answer. There's no like right or wrong answer usually with cards. So with that, I had mentioned one of the things is the ability to create rounds. So in this case, it's the create group. So this would divide up the information. So all of these cards, I could have put all 15 cards on one page, but that would have been really overwhelming of information. That wouldn't benefit any of my students. So I wanted to pace it a little bit. I wanted to divide it up. This is one way that you can divide up that information so that it's in smaller, more manageable chunks. I'm going to just put this as my example. With the card itself, you have the ability to have text. As we can see, there's my text on one side. There's nothing on the other side right now. But I could then add in addition to the text, I could add an image, or substituting the text, I can add an image. So I could pull in images from my hard drive on my computer. I could do an image search, Google Drive, OneDrive, and our content gallery. Content gallery is filled with really great images, especially related to letters and numbers. So for those primary level students, that would be fantastic. I'm going to do just an image search. I had mentioned maybe the vocabulary words, so like monarchy. Now, usually when you would do an image search, if you have any text in that box already, it's going to pull up whatever was written. So pulling up monarchy, and we'll have a picture of a crown. And now my student, if this were written monarchy, they would have the definition on one side. They could have that visual representation on the opposite side. And then I could also include sound, so an MP4 file, as well as record my own audio. So if I record my own audio, I have up to 15 seconds that I can record. If I do this right now, since I have my headphones on, you're not going to be able to hear the audio, so I'm not going to do that, but I can record my own audio into it. So maybe I would be reading the definition of the word or saying the word, providing that extra support for our students who are auditory learners. I also can include, and I just discovered this last week, so I'm still definitely nerding out about it. We have the ability to add in not just images, but on these bigger tiles, we can actually add in videos, so MP4 file videos. So I'm going to pull one up, if I can find one real quick. Let's see, I have an old video I made for YouTube. If the video has sound on it, then the sound would also play. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it since I am wearing my headphones. This particular file is kind of big, so it might take a minute or two to load in, but I can have that extra support for my students as well. So this is a long video. This is, well, long in the sense it's like 3 minutes, but you could also do those really short little like 10-second, I don't know if it's GIF or GIF. I'm never going to be able to pronounce it correctly. You could pull in those little video clips and it would just play on a loop over and over. So as you can see, our video is playing here. I could make this larger, and I'm not sure if you'll hear the audio of it, but there's the audio that goes with the video itself. So as it's going through, students would have that additional support, and then just flip the card to whatever task I maybe wanted them to complete. So that's one feature that we have with that. I'm still really excited about that. I have so many ideas kind of percolating of what I want to do with this little new feature of being able to add in those videos. Danielle? Yes?
Do you know the maximum length or size for the MP4 that goes in the background?
I haven't tested that yet. I know with this particular one, this video clip was, I think, about 3.5 minutes.
I put one in the other day for 6 minutes. So someone's asking this.
Okay.
I put one in for 6 minutes and it went. So I'm not sure that there's a limit, and we can check on that.
I'm going to write that
down. But I think if we get much longer than 6 minutes, we're kind of missing the boat with attention span.
Yes.
But I know I put one in for about that long. The other question is, can the video go on either side of the card?
Yep, absolutely. So right now I have it on the front side. I could also I'll put a little different video clip a shorter one if I can find it real quick. I could also put it on the back side. So I'm just pulling in from my computer hard drive. So you are in luck in that I haven't cleaned it out in a while. So I think there's probably going to be a few things I could choose from. Just have to find one. Oh, there we go. So I'll add that in. So the MP4 I'm putting in now, I used with and I still don't know if it's GIF or GIF, but same idea. So I just did a Google drawing and then uploaded it into a GIF creator. And now I have a little moving alligator mouth. And again, I can make that full size as well. This one does not have any sound, so there would be no audio that goes with it, but I could record my own sound to go over it. So yeah, it can go on either side of the card. So a super cool feature. I'm really excited to play with that a lot more. All right, are there any other questions before I move forward?
I don't have any other questions, but I do want to remind people to please go in and answer the polls.
So, and while you're doing that, then I will show you our poll feature that we have. So this would be great if you want that live real-time response from students. So as you're kind of helping with checking for understanding, providing feedback, monitoring their progress, our polls, and I'm going to go to one that I've already created. Do this one. So in a poll feature, students would access the poll from their own device. So when I began the poll, there would be a QR code on display or a website that the students would go to, and they would just type in the numbers after to access the poll. They could play it on a Chromebook, iPad, cell phone, so anything that is web enabled, they can access the poll. As a teacher, you have a few different templates of question types to ask. So this was one from our team meeting. So I can have multiple choice questions. So I can add in more multiple choice questions. I can add in a yes/no question. This text is also customizable, so if I wanted to change it to true or false, I could do it that way. So it just gives you the two options. We also have short answer response. So students would answer with a text, and then that information would appear. And with all of these, you have the ability to add time limits. So this would be the response time. You as a teacher would control the wait time. So you would determine when is this question going to become, I always say, like live. So when can students start answering it, and then how much time do you want to give them to answer it? So you can obviously set for no time limit. So text would be another one. And then some of the new features that we have with poll is we have the ability to add an image. So image could be from, if they're accessing this on their cell phone, they could use their camera on their phone, or if they have a Chromebook with a webcam, they could use that, or any image that's been saved to their device. So if they've already saved an image, or if they want to just go online and grab an image, they can add in that picture and then respond with a picture, or they can respond with a picture and text. So it would be the same idea. They would have the image and then a little text box below where they could add information. And then I think what will quickly become my new favorite is the drawing tool. So with drawing, students would, once it becomes live, they would have a little mini whiteboard on their device. Has a few different colors, like your basic kind of primary and secondary colors. And students could draw and then submit that answer in as well. So these are really great ways to just do that quick checking for understanding, getting immediate feedback from your students, monitoring their progress as they're going. And then when we go back to the classroom, you can do the same thing. They can be working on it in class as well. So we go back to home. And then all of that data can be exported. So I know that that was a lot. I know UDL has a lot of components, and I know that I was able to show you a lot of the features. I'd like to give you a second more if you have any other questions.
No questions coming in as of yet, Danielle.
All right.
So I will keep you updated.
Okay, so I'll wrap it up then with just describing some other ways to add additional scaffolds and support. So we saw when we were playing this lesson, I had the little arrow or the I button in the corner that would provide more information. I can, for my students, if I'm sending this to my students to complete on their own device, I can provide in my description, I can provide the instructions of what I want them to do, or additional reminders and tips as they're completing the lesson activity. I could also pull in YouTube videos. So I could just do a search for a particular video, or in this case, I copied and pasted a YouTube link. I can change the start and the end time of that video. So if I only wanted maybe 30 seconds in the middle, I can alter when I want that video to play. And I can have all of this begin before the students actually complete the lesson activity. So I can set it so that the video comes first. I can set it so that the information in the description appears before they're able to engage in the interactive activity itself. And then I can also provide those links for my additional resources. So then students would be able to access that information as they were playing. I'm going to go ahead and turn those back off. Just again, to show you where that would be, this little I information icon here. Once it's clicked, students can see that information. So if I didn't have the video playing before, such as the way I have it set up now, they can then access that video. They can make it full screen. They can pause the video as it's going. And then there's my additional supports, my extra materials, my outside resources, and then my description with instructions of what to do. So just another way to build in those added supports for your kiddos. So that was a lot. I'm hoping that I didn't overwhelm anyone.
Everything was good. Thank you, Danielle, for your presentation to us once again. I also would like to ask everyone if you would please send us any ideas that you have of things that you would like us to cover on our webinars. We would appreciate that. Our email, my email, is jr@nuiteq.com. So jr@nuiteq.com. Please send any emails with any topics you need us to cover for you that would be helpful to you in your classroom. And any ideas or questions that you have, please feel free to answer or to send those also, and I'll try to get you an answer. So before you leave, if you could go through and answer the poll, I would appreciate it. There are two again. I would appreciate that. I would like to thank Danielle for taking the time out to prepare and cover everything for us this evening. Again, thanks, Danielle. Thanks, everyone, for coming and being a part of this, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a great week.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.